Let's talk to the filmmakers behind 1 Hour OUTCALL. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, and I am pleased to have on the filmmakers behind the independent feature 1 Hour OUTCALL. We have T. Arthur Cottam, the director, and William Norrett, writer, actor, who did a fabulous job in this film. Really fabulous job. Amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So I want to talk about what inspired this. It's not, and I think that like you could look at the subject matter is about William, your character's relationship with a prostitute, but it's not played. This isn't like anything where it's not like, I mean, yes, there's sex in the movie, but it's not played in an exploitative way.
Yes, right.
And I'm sure that was by design. So when you look at the subject matter, you might think, well, this is going to be salacious. It's actually not. It's about your relationship with this prostitute, but then also the repairing of other broken relationships. Can you talk about what inspired this? What inspired you to write this?
Sure. Well, I mean, just on a dream level, I've always dreamt about making a feature film. So, I mean, I was thinking in terms of knowing that it would be a micro budget or a low budget feature, like what was conceivable in terms of a story that could be told. So I kind of gravitated towards a man and a woman and their relationship and the arc of a relationship. But as far as the relationship between an escort and her client, it's intriguing to me to tell a story that deals with that kind of relationship that doesn't necessarily have to do with the sexual aspect of it, but it's always hovering in the background. So that's when I wrote the script, it was important for that to be kind of lingering and kind of hovering around, but never to be the absolute focus. And then tell a story non-linearly with the arc of the relationship kind of going naturally, even though it's bouncing back and forth between episodes.
Yeah, and for me, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, Arthur, like, well, how did you balance that? Because there was the dynamic. It's not just the conversations, but it's like this is playing out in different timelines.
Right. So first of all, to kind of address the sexual part of it, I did want enough sex in it to remind people, that this is a transactional relationship. But to Bill's point, it's not about the sex, it's about the relationships and the complexities of the relationships between these two and the other characters that come in throughout the film. In terms of balancing the complexity of jumping back and forth through time, that was really exciting for me. When Bill originally told me about the project, that was what really excited me about it. Not just the complexity of the relationships, but to me, it's like putting together a puzzle, and I've always loved puzzles. So how do I figure out how to make this movie not just two people in a room talking? How do I make it visually interesting for the audience? And how do I keep the audience engaged at the same time while we're jumping back and forth through time? Because you don't want the audience to be lost, because then they're not paying attention to what's happening in the movie. So for me, that was the door sequence in the beginning. I had sort of crafted that and executed that in order to keep the audience engaged.
Well, I do like that it those time bouncing back and forth, because it 1 minute there's this conversation, the next there's just a complete flip of that, and then Bill gets slapped in the face or a drink. There's
many times.
You get hurt a lot, Bill.
I'm glad you enjoyed that, Chris. So, yeah.
Well, it was.
We all enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of. Yeah. I'm sure maybe on the set when you're doing that stuff, you got to make it look real for the camera. But
Yeah. No. I mean, it's.
Oh, she went for it.
You do right. You do what you got to do. You do what you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bill was okay with it. Bill was a good sport about it.
Well, I did, the only thing it reminded me of is the movie Clute, which I'm sure you've probably heard comparisons, which deals with the same, which is also not particularly played salaciously. So I'm just curious with, in the time that we live in with so much just social upheaval, how audiences have responded to the film, what their take is. I think everything is handled very well and in very sensitive way, but I don't represent all people. So I know I'm serious. I'm just curious. Like, I'm just thinking this is difficult subject matter. I think.
Well, I mean, I know it sounds perhaps like lip service, but it's really not. I really set out to write a script where it was non-judgmental, first of all, to dealing with the profession in this instance. It was also important to me because I'm a man. I want to write all my characters to be three-dimensional and to be strong characters, but it was important to me to write a strong female character. And I have actually been pleasantly surprised with, it's been a combination of debate given the issues of the film, but also kind of an acknowledgement of how nuanced that we've handled it. So I've actually been pleasantly surprised with, I mean, because again, in the times we live in, there might be kind of ready-made debate or ready-made criticism or whatever, but I do think by and large the reaction has been complimentary in terms of how nuanced we've handled it.
Yeah, and that's part of what's been exciting for me is to hear the audience's reaction afterwards, to hear people discuss it afterwards. I remember there was one screening where we were hanging out with people afterwards and they were arguing very heatedly about the themes of the film. And is Greg, which is Bill's character in the movie, is Greg a bad guy or is he a good guy that does bad things? And they were going at it. It was fun to watch.
Yeah.
Well, I think Greg is a good guy that does bad things, maybe with the right intentions in mind, but maybe the pathway to getting there is wrong. I actually think that the female characters in this are very well done. They're all very strong and well represented. And if anything, it's kind of I guess in your writing process, a reflection and like I think your character Greg is going through this whole self inventory, and it's you know, I mean, parts are very moving and it's also very confrontational. Is that sort of what, I mean, I assume that was your intention. I'm just telling you, I got it. So
sure. No, yeah, no, that was, I mean, that was the intention in part because when I came up with the idea, I was living in a loft downtown. And again, you know, you're trying to make an independent film. So you're trying to use whatever's available. And I had this space and I was like, oh, this would be a great location to kind of have a confrontation, kind of a two-hander argument going on. So that was part of the intention. And when I write characters, I mean, they all kind of stem from me in my mind. So in a certain aspect, they all kind of represent the way I kind of talk and the way that's the starting point. But again, it's important to me that at the end of the process, even though they're going to be different people and different characters, they still have a high level of intellect and they have a high level of being able to have a conversation and so forth. So conversations and confrontations are kind of naturally interlinked when you write dialogue for a film. So it kind of worked out well. So.
And for me, I just wanted to make sure it didn't look like a movie that was about two people arguing in a room for an hour and a half. So visually, I tried to balance that by switching up the locations within the apartment. So there's a scene that takes place in the bathtub. There's a scene that takes place in the living room, kitchen, dining room. So visually, I tried to mix it up in that way so that it didn't feel like, just a smaller movie than
well, and that's where, I mean, T did a million fantastic things directing the movie, but that's where, I mean, I have a very verbal sense. T's got a visual sense. I mean, not that he doesn't have a verbal sense, but I'm more verbal than visual when he really added the visual quality to the film, which really took my script and basically brought it to a higher level.
Well, and not to directly ask you, T, how to direct nude scenes, but there is these days, and I don't, if I recall, I'm trying to think if there's any nudity in the movie. I think they're suggested, or there's sort of, they're suggested, but it's so well handled. I don't think Mr. Skin could find anything. But but what I'm saying is that there's sort of like the direction of nude scenes or scenes involving romance now have completely changed. And one, after Me Too, and also additionally in the age of COVID, they're talking about doing like romantic scenes now using digital effects. This is not a joke. I have heard this from filmmakers saying this is how we're going to do this these days. crazy. But I do want to ask, like, one, how you approach those scenes, because there's a level of sensitivity that must be kept in mind. But secondly, there's also, and I've said when I've had conversations with directors, it's like there's a different kind of nude scene, and it's, I think, when the actors feel comfortable enough to be emotionally naked, so to speak. So I guess I just wanted to use the word nudity quite a bit. But can you talk about those scenes, and then also how the logistics of doing those scenes, how and making that work, and then additionally, the scenes where there's some emotional nudity, so to speak.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking, Chris. And for people who have seen my previous movies, they know that I don't shy away from nudity. So it's not something that's really foreign to me. And the way I usually handle it is I just try to be respectful all around. And I try to have the conversations that a lot of filmmakers, in my experience, are maybe not willing to have. Because even on the acting side of things, I've had conversations with filmmakers where I read a script and I see that there's something sexual in there, and I ask them, how are we gonna, what's your expectation here? And they just kind of laugh, or they don't want to talk about it, or they get really uncomfortable. And for me, I don't believe in shying away from it. I believe in having a direct conversation about it, and remembering that at the end of the day, we're all people. You're dealing with people and emotions, and certain things can come up. For example, there was one scene with Natalia, who's the lead actress, where we made it very clear ahead of time, even in the casting process, that there is an expectation of simulated sex and nudity for the film. And Natalia was fine with that, and she was amazing to work with. But there was one scene where she got triggered emotionally, and it was during a sex scene. So, she and I stepped aside away from everybody, and we just had a conversation. And I asked her what was going on with her, and she said, I really don't know what's going on with me. I just know that there's emotion coming up over this. And I just gave her the space to kind of express that. And I asked her, is there anything that we can do to make you feel more comfortable? Because ultimately, that if the actors don't feel safe, if people in general, the crew, if people don't feel safe, then in my mind, that's a failure on a set. I think it's important for people to feel safe and to have their voices heard.
Yeah.
And then go ahead, Bill.
No, I was just going to say, T's communication, and he's a producer on the film. I was a producer on the film. It was important to me to just every step of the way be very clear, and then just be very clear that what was going to happen was accepted by everyone involved. And I mean, that's an instance where I feel T handled it expertly, and it's really kind of the way things are supposed to happen. Just like if anything arises while you're on set with delicate material like that, you talk it out and you make sure everybody's comfortable and communicate clearly before you move on. And
I think it's important that those conversations happen one-on-one too. So I'm not going to have a conversation with Natalia in front of the rest of the cast and crew, because that's a very individual experience that she's having. And it's an intimate conversation that we're having. So especially with conversations like that, also logistically speaking, when there is sexual content happening, or when people are in a situation where they may feel vulnerable, I think it's important to ask, how many people are you comfortable, ask the actors, so Bill and Natalia, how many people are you comfortable having on set? And I was okay. It was a small crew anyway.
Well, yeah, we were fortunate that we basically had a very small crew regardless. So yeah.
Right. So it was easy to do that. But, sometimes other crew members that come in, they may be irritated by that, or they may want to be in on the process. But, you have to take into account the people who are on camera who really need to feel safe in that moment.
Yeah, well, I've heard everything from closed set to the crew was naked. So that's, you know what I mean? Like there's different ways of approaching it.
Right.
Well, I really want to, I'm so pleased to hear that this film is causing discussion, and maybe a good kind of argument, So I want to thank you, T and William, for being on the Film Threat podcast. The movie is 1 Hour Outcall, and it's on. I'm just going to assume it's on like all VOD platforms. That's how I get all my movies these days.
Yeah,
So,
that's,
basically, yes.
Assume. And if you want more information, you can go to our website at www.onehouralcohol.com.
1houroutcall.com. And I have to thank our sponsor, Storyblocks. If you go to storyblocks.com/film threat, up your game, take your small indie movie to a big level with 1 million plus clips available on the site. It's such a great resource for filmmakers. We use it here at Film Threat. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the Film Threat podcast.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks so much for having us, Chris.